Hello, I'm Michael Hooper, and this is my review of Let It Come Down by Paul Bowles. I've always been interested in Morocco since reading about the Beats going there to meet Paul Bowles in Tangier. Gregory Corso, William Burroughs, and Allen Ginsberg met with Bowles in 1961. Here's a famous photograph of that meeting, if you can see it there. I later met Allen Ginsberg in 1993, a seminal encounter for me personally. I recently reviewed Paul Bowles' first book, The Sheltering Sky, and then I just finished the second book, Let It Come Down. Published in 1952, Let It Come Down is a deep dive into the seedier sides of Tangier after World War II, when its international zone attracted all kinds of characters who were trying to do business away from their home countries. Needless to say, some of these businesses operating in the international zone were a bit shady. At this time, France, Spain, and England controlled and administered this international zone through an agreement established in 1923. Back then, Tangier had about 40,000 Muslims, 31,000 Christians, and about 15,000 Jews, plus all kinds of foreigners, according to Wiki. The books Darkness, Rainy Days and Nights, Cosmopolitan Characters, and Web of Entanglements remind me of film noir movies like Casablanca. I could just see Humphrey Bogart among the cast of characters in this book. Let It Come Down is about an American named Nelson Dyer, who gets a job in Tangier, but the job isn't exactly what he thought it might be. Dyer seems like a typical American with overconfidence, impatience, out for a good time, and hoping for a steady job with a new life. Shortly after he shows up, he goes to a party where he meets a woman who tells him that his employer, Jack Wilcox, is not what he seems. That indeed Jack's office has very little business. We learn that Jack Wilcox is actually behind on his rent at a high-end hotel. One day, Dyer shows up at Jack's office, but Jack sends him away. I don't need you. Here's some reading material. I'll call you when I need you. So Dyer explores the hashish cafes and brothels and restaurants in Tangier. At one bar, he meets a girl he likes and wants to be with her every day. Her name is Hadija, and she is lovely and fun and enjoys having men spend money on her. She seems to be involved with another woman. Hadija takes Dyer on a lovely trip to the beach where they explore some caves on the shore. Dyer seems a little offended when he sees some boys frolicking in the sun without any clothes on. His repulsive reaction is like a metaphor for his outlook here. It seems like he wants to have a good time, but he's not sure he really likes the people. At the beach, inside the entrance to a cave, he tries to take off Hadija's dress, but she wouldn't let him. However, she did let him have his way with her somewhat, and he seems satisfied, sexually, I suppose, and hopes to repeat this affair with this girl, but this girl's partner doesn't want it to continue. Eventually, Jack Wilcox explains what Dyer must do for his job. Essentially carry money from one person to another and exchange it along the way from 5-pound notes to Spanish pesetas. I remember when I traveled to Europe in 1990 and there was no euro. Countries in Europe had their own currency. And there were a lot of money changers at airports and bus stations and train stations. Back then, there was a wide variety of exchange rates. You could get ripped off if you really didn't do the math. People could take advantage of you. It seems to me there's some of this type of business going on in Tangier. Dyer is a bit of a slouch, not very dedicated, but he does obey orders and picks up the money, gets the money exchanged, and tries to deliver it to another bank, the final destination. But the bank's closed. And then he decides to steal the money. Dyer visits Daisy, his friend that he had met. Uh, she's a wealthy woman who lives in Tangier, and she befriended him and invites him to join her for a little party at her place, where he consumes for the very first time majun, a kind of cannabis jam. Eventually, he leaves her to meet up with Tahami. He hires Tahami to help him get away with the stolen money. Tahami takes him on a boat. Well, actually, they hire a guy who takes this boat and they take him over to Spain. The driver of the boat takes 1,000 peseta note from Dyer and leaves the two men on shore. They consume quite a bit of keef, another form of cannabis, in a pipe they share. They're quite high on this cannabis, but what's strange is how Dyer reacts to it. He goes a bit mad and starts getting paranoid about his Muslim friend. Yet his Muslim friend takes him to an empty home and then brings food to him from his in-laws who live nearby. They eat and smoke more cannabis. Then the next day, Dyer, he dreams up these ideas that Tahami is going to bring a gang of thugs over and beat him up and steal his money. While walking around, Dyer gets the idea for some reason that he should steal this hammer and nail from a carpenter. So he drops it into his pocket, and that evening he sees his friend sleeping, and so he takes the nail and puts it in the guy's ear and drives it into his ear and kills him. This form of violence seems unreal. I've been around people who smoked cannabis and they never get violent. It seems to me I've seen more violence associated with alcohol than cannabis. I admit, Dyer is overly aggressive with women. With Daisy, he crashes her bed while she is eating, creating a messy rendezvous. But this notion that Dyer's going to kill Tahami with a hammer and nail just seems ludicrous. Daisy finds him and tells him to come back with her to Tangier and give the money back to Ronnie and everything will be okay. Instead, he says, I can't return. Rot, rubbish. Now, come, don't disgust me with your fear. There's nothing more revolting than a man who's afraid, she said. He laughs unpleasantly. Dyer is a nerd in lust for a barmaid. He's lazy and uninventive. He just kind of falls into this mess and seems to can't find his way out. At one point he asks himself, why am I here? What am I doing here? She says, I'm the biggest fool of all because through some ghastly defect in my character, I've somehow let myself become fond of you. But after she sees the dead body in the kitchen, she says, she leaves and she says, I shall tell Ronnie I couldn't find you. I've listened to a couple of interviews with Paul Bowles. One of them, he said he wrote about violence in his books, but really didn't experience violence in his own personal life. I could say myself, cannabis users are not typically violent people. And even Paul Bowles knows this. I mean, he used cannabis his whole life. Yet he said you cannot have a story without conflict. And I think the violence brings in the conflict. But in this case, he didn't need a murderer to tell a story about a shallow American man with a loose moral fiber out for a good time. The story ends with the departure of Daisy, so we don't know exactly what happens to Dyer, but I think jail or death are both real possibilities. The book further intrigues me, though, about the city of Tangier. I really want to visit there. I'm kind of fascinated by all the bohemians and artists who settled there over the years. And of course, Paul Bowles and his wife Jane lived in Tangier for a long time, many, many years. And Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs, wrote quite a bit about going to Tangier. And I know Burroughs worked on his book Naked Lunch there, and Allen Ginsberg helped him. I feel like I'm one handshake away from Paul Bowles because I met Allen Ginsberg at a bookshop in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1993. Allen and I talked for a bit, and he signed some books for me. This encounter is documented in my book, The Wonderment Years, Odyssey of a Bohemian, published by Amazon earlier this year. Paul Bowles himself was not a beatnik, but he certainly influenced these people. I do appreciate Let It Come Down. It's a very wet and rainy story in Tangier. It seems like it's always raining when there's trouble. The film noir ambiance is captivating, but the climax seems unreal. I like the writing, but not the ending. If anything, it gave me a little more desire to see Tangier. Writing for GQ magazine in October 1963, Paul Bowles wrote an essay about Tangier, saying living in Tangier, however, has still meant being witness to an array of strange episodes in the lives of a whole series of bizarre characters. Nowhere have I seen such a concentration of eccentrics. Well, that's the end of my video. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I hope you like it. And if you're interested, subscribe to my channel. I hope to do more videos like this. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.